We were hard at work finding out what 1,344 CEOs think 2014 holds in store for them. You know, I thought I'd spend the next 4 days asking all the global business leaders here in Davos if 2014 will be the year of a stable recovery. And I don't think I need to work any harder. I've got my answer already. This is from the PwC annual Global CEO Survey that PwC conducts every single year, the findings of which are released just before the World Economic Forum's annual summit kicks off. And it's very interesting because it says that twice as many CEOs around the world as last year believe that the global economy will improve in the next 12 months. To talk more about the findings of this survey and what CEOs have top of mind in terms of opportunities and challenges, I have with me Dennis Nally, the chairman of PwC International. Mr. Nally, thank you so much for your time.
Hi, how are you? Great to be with you.
This is going to be the year of recovery then, isn't it?
Well, we hope it is. I mean, it's clearly pointing in the right direction is the way I describe it. Confidence levels, as you just indicated, CEOs are feeling better today than they did 12 months ago. So it's a recovery that's on its way, that's moving forward. And not to say there aren't issues, challenges, problems that the CEOs are concerned about, but relative to last year, people are feeling better, going into 2014.
Are they expecting volatility? Is that some of the nuance you got in your survey?
I think volatility is the operative word these days. When you look at, the global economy, different parts of the world are, moving in different directions. I think without question, CEOs are getting more comfortable dealing with this volatility. Don't like it, but getting more comfortable dealing with it. I think that's just a fact of life in terms of where we are in this economic recovery.
The reason I ask you this is, are they expecting a one-way up recovery cycle, or is this going to be a recovery cycle that's plagued with several downtrends as well?
Well, if you go back a year ago, I think when we were here in Davos, people were very concerned about what was going on in Europe and whether Europe would continue to weather the storm, make progress, or whether or not there's going to be another surprise. I think part of the increase in confidence levels comes from the fact that, guess what? The past 12 months, make it basically move through the economic cycle here in Europe without a major event, without a major negative event taking place. And I think that's given people some encouragement that notwithstanding the challenges that are still there, they haven't gone away, there's still challenges, but it seems to be, moving in the right direction. But having said that, volatility, is certainly a part of where we expect this economy to really go into the future.
So it's interesting, Western Europe is the most confident region by far, if you were to break these survey results down region-wise. And Russia is the most confident country-wise, in terms of their outlook, CEO's outlook for 2014. And I also noticed that in that country-wise breakup, you have India at number 4. And this is at odds with the mood that we noticed back in India, because it's a fairly pessimistic one, and now a slightly nervous one, given that we have that mid-year election. So 49% of the CEOs in India are confident about revenue growth in 2014. Where does that come from?
Well, I think it goes to the underlying potential in this economy. I would say the same thing about Russia, quite frankly. CEOs in Russia, high levels of confidence. The economy growing at 1 or 1.5%. India, as you know, will grow 5.2% this year. But not what you want it to be, but the potential for those opportunities in these countries are so great. I think that's what's driving the confidence levels. I think there's issues, concerns. You alluded to one of them in India, which is the upcoming elections. I think there's a lot of conversation, better than I, about expectations. But confidence levels will continue to increase, in my mind, to the extent that the new government, the coalition government, really, develops pro-business policies, practices, regulations, makes it easier to do business, opening up some foreign investment. I think that will really keep the economy moving in a very good direction for the longer term.
All right, so I'm looking forward to meeting those 49% CEOs, because I can't seem to find even one. But nonetheless, I do want to talk about the top concerns that CEOs have listed for this year. And it's interesting. The two of them are Overregulation, again, India features on that list fairly high. CEOs very concerned about overregulation. And fiscal deficit. And this is business now worried that government spending is going to crowd it out in some fashion. Can you talk to us a little bit about what CEOs said specifically they thought the outcome of these top two concerns will be for 2014?
So let's take the two issues separately. So regulation. We all know coming out of the financial crisis, governments, regulators around the world, not unique to India, around the world, felt that there needed to be changes. And, we've seen a number of significant changes that have been enacted, whether it's Dodd-Frank in the United States, Basel III requirements here in Europe, and other parts of the world as well. Significant regulatory changes that either have been announced and approved or ones that are still being discussed. Mm-hmm. What CEOs are basically saying is these changes, when you have a financial crisis like we have, that regulatory pendulum swung all the way to one side. And therefore, what's happening is rules, regulations are much more complex. They're inconsistent from one part of the world to another part of the world. You're trying to operate a global business, raises costs. And of course, if the rules and regulations aren't finalized, you have the uncertainty of what ultimately will be implemented. And so the top concern we saw in this year's survey, first time we've ever seen regulation being the top concern from the CEOs, although it's always been a topic that we've talked about.
I'm supposing because growth is finally coming back. So
well,
maybe that's no
I think the question that you really start to ask yourself when you're talking to many of the CEOs is what could growth be had there been more positive regulation policies to incent investment. Good regulation is the way I describe it. And of course, I don't think anybody's intentionally going to put in a bad regulation, but the fact is that with the volume that you're looking at around the world, this is the top concern. The second issue, though, you talk about is fiscal deficit, a key issue. And the reason I say it's a key issue is with the degree of influence that governments today around the world have on the economy, which is significant coming out of the financial crisis, and you look at the deficits that exist, CEOs know there's only one or two ways that you're going to deal with deficits. One, raise revenue, e.g. increase taxes, or two, cut spending. And when you don't know and you don't have clarity as to what exactly is going to happen, because these deficits have to be dealt with, they're not sustainable. In the United States, 92% of the CEOs cited the federal deficits as the number one issue. And of course, what that does, it without clarity, without certainty, it has an effect on your willingness to invest, a willingness to make decisions, a willingness to hire, and again, would say it's definitely holding back the economic recovery. So I think it's an instructive point. I think there has to be balance here when you cut through it, but those are the top two issues that the CEOs are talking about, which today is sort of remarkable when you think about where we've been over the last couple of years.
In the major trends that you've listed in this report, I thought one I'd like to touch upon. So you've said technology advancement is one big trend that CEOs are working with. Demographic shifts is the second one. Shift in economic power is the third one. And I want to bring in here, and I'm not sure it's a trend necessarily, but the changes that the international tax system is going to go through. And 2/3 of CEOs saying that the current system needs an overhaul, but only 1/4 believe that the OECD's BEPS plan is going to be a success. Mm-hmm. And most of them, 40%, I think, in fact, said that there's going to be no consensus. Where are we going to see tax policy go in this year at least?
Well, I think it's a critical issue. I mean, most of the tax systems that have been developed around the world, were based on an economy of, manufacture and shipment of hard goods. So a world, that is very different than what we have today. When you think about technology, you think about IP, you think about, intellectual property and how, value creation is determined, right? And so the tax system needs to be updated, and I would say updated in just about all countries around the world. And then, of course, you get into the big debate around, every country has put in their own respective policies to deal with their investment decisions that they're trying to make. So, for example, if you're trying to incent different companies to make an investment to create jobs, you may present, a particular tax policy to encourage or incent that company to make that investment. Every country around the world does this, right? And so what you're really talking about is, how do you simplify, streamline, re-engineer a tax system for today's world, recognizing that you're still going to have a lot of individual country-by-country competition, because that's what countries do. They're trying to make their economy as competitive as they possibly can from an investment standpoint or from a job standpoint. Obviously, in doing so, you're going to have winners and losers in that process, right? Don't underestimate that challenge, that issue. It's on the G20 agenda this year. The OECD work that you point to is early days, but we don't underestimate the complexity for actually getting something accomplished, but it's certainly one that is worthy of a lot of effort, because I think it's clearly pointing to a system that is very much outdated and in need of reform.
Fair enough. One final question, and that's on India. Most Indian CEOs, like we've already discussed, confident about revenue growth this year, confident about global economic recovery at least. The changes in terms of revenue growth expectations are not that much. I thought there was one set of figures on restructuring that seemed to indicate that the pain is not yet out of the system, because you had 83% of Indian CEOs who responded to your survey restructure last year, and 69 expect to do the same this year, which means there's considerable pain still left in the system. But the good news is that India Inc. expects to hire more. So 57% expect to boost headcount, only 13% say they're going to consider layoffs. Yeah. That's a fairly sort of split, schizoid view of how business is in India, right? Yeah. If 69% are still going to have to restructure, they're still, in debt pain. And yet you've got such a large number saying that they're looking to hire this year.
Well, maybe another way to look at this is that this whole notion of having one-off kinds of restructurings that we've all talked about in the past, this is becoming the norm. That in order to deal with the fast-paced changes in this economy, global competitiveness, there's a constant need to, restructure, to re-engineer, to ensure that your products and services are competitive on a global basis. Now, I happen to take that view. I don't think the days of running a business without having significant restructurings or re-engineering taking place as a normal part of what you do day in and day out. I think that's just a fact of life in terms of how the economy is moving and moving so quickly. The good news, as you point out, though, in the case of India, even with that type of restructuring, what could be technology investments, it could be supply chain management, it could be a lot of different things without getting into the specifics. The Indian CEOs are still talking about hiring significant numbers of people, and to me that's the good news.
All right, Mr. Nally, thank you so much for your time. We look forward to sitting down and speaking with you in more detail when you come to India next. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thanks.